Well, before we start really looking at the political traditions and the values that shape how policy problems are represented, let's look at specific policy debates and pivotal ideas in social policy in the Australian context. So ideas such as needs versus wants, and even the idea of service or social policy being regarded as merit versus assistance are very important ideas when it comes to really discussing social policy in the Australian context. This idea of approaching social policy through the consideration that we are addressing the rights of people, and even the question of justice and efficiency in how we achieve outcome in policy debates is very important, is a very important consideration, because these ideas get to define who gets to decide exactly about how we make policies, but also what is regarded as just policies. To what extent can we assume we are making or we are doing justice in the way we organize policies? So again, all these are core concepts and ideas we really want to consider when doing policies or when practicing under different policy frameworks. So how these ideas and values are interpreted and the significance that is placed on them depends on many factors, and of course gets to influence what works, how individuals versus or individuals and societies behave and develop specific policies, and even the role of and relationship between the states and the individuals, whether is it people's or individuals' right to get access to services through different policy frameworks, or to what extent even the government should be intervening to regulate the social policy sector. So again, all these are pivotal ideas we really want to consider when discussing social policy. And this in itself really is an area where we find again a lot of tensions, tensions in the welfare, responsibilities, and values. So scholars have argued that welfare raises fundamental questions about the rights and obligations of citizenship and about the scope and purpose of public policy. And again, all this is very much value-laden. The consideration of social policy being the rights of the people and the obligation of the government to intervene in social policy to regulate things, all these are debates which are very much deep-rooted in belief systems, but also in political traditions. So when we speak in details in the later part of this recording, when we start speaking about the political traditions, we shall get to develop this idea more and more. But again, all these, of course, depend on people's positionality, the positions and the considerations and underpinnings and understanding people have on policy and its different understanding as either rights or needs or want and entitlement related issues. All these again are quite determined by people's positionality. And of course, this raises questions about welfare and again, responsibility and what is important, what is regarded as efficient policies and what is regarded in a different way. So McClelland really argues that the tensions between the principles of community responsibility towards others and that of personal responsibility towards oneself represents one of the key value tensions in the welfare. And if you look at the literature, not only in the Australian context, but even classic literature, like the literature from the Enlightenment movement, you'll find these tensions between scholars as to what extent the government ought to intervene in specific policy areas, such as in regulating the economics and participating in the redistribution of resources, or even regulating social life broadly. So this has always been an area of constant dispute and tensions, even among scholars. So the whole idea of political traditions, which we shall be speaking about later, places different priorities on these different policy ideas. And this really speaks to the tensions on, what we end up regarding as policies and to what extent different actors can be involved in addressing those policy areas. So the policy landscape is therefore framed in regards to the attitudes, and these attitudes are attitudes toward specific considerations, including looking at the economic aspect of policy. And this really speaks to the involvement of the government in the redistribution of resources and to what extent the government can be involved in those kinds of initiatives. So at the left on this image, you'll see that there is this belief that the government should be, the economic redistribution should be run by cooperative, collective, or collective actions, if you like. And on the right, you see the belief that this should be left to the market. And again, this is not typically an Australian debate only. It is classical debate. There have always been, these tensions between the physiocrats and other scholars from the Enlightenment movement, for example, on whether the government should intervene to regulate the economy or not. So this is quite an intergenerational debate. But also important consideration here is this consideration of the social aspect of things, or the amount of personal freedom that we should have from the government intervening even in regulating what other people might perceive as private matter. And again, on these key debates, you'll find different political parties holding different views. And the only reason they hold different views is because they have different political traditions. A key example in the Australian context is whether Medicare should offer basic dental care for all Australians. And you can see clearly on this specific aspect, different political parties having different positions and different views. The Greens, for example, strongly agreeing. The Australian Labor Party somewhat agrees, and the Liberal Party somewhat disagrees. And again, on another question on how much money should out of work Australians receive in unemployment benefits. Again, you see the Greens much more, the Australian Labor Party saying somewhat more, and to some extent, the Labor, the Liberal National Party, adopting a different point of view. So, and so on and so forth. So you have these different views and differences into how different political parties take positions. But what I really want to highlight here is these viewpoints are not coming from, a void. These viewpoints are really coming from what these parties believe in. And I think this is the idea we shall be unpacking in the later part of this recording when we start speaking about the political traditions. So where does the Australian parties sit? You can see clearly in terms of the different conceptualizations, the Labour National Party being portrayed mostly as a conservative one, and then the Australian, the ALP being regarded mostly as social, and then the Greens being regarded as progressive. So, and again, all these data, all these details are taken from a website called Vote Campus. And it is a very good thing to remind you that these are just randomly taken from this website, and the data relies on a period when LNP was in power. So you might want to consider that and think what it suggests in terms of the result. So you might also want to go on that same website and fill in, the survey for yourself and see where you really sit in terms of what you believe in, and what are your viewpoints and political positions regarding different policy issues in the Australian context. Very much really encourage you to go on the website. I think the questions have been updated for this year, 2025. You might want to consider that and see whether you can assess your own beliefs and see whether you can end up coming with a concept on which political tradition do you belong to. Thank you very much, and see you in the next module.